points. To launch this discussion, I'm very happy to have our host here, MEP Frank Bogovic. He is one of the co-chairs of the RUMRA Smart Villages Intergroup. Frank, do you want to take it away?
Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you very much to join this webinar, Go Out of Town, briefing series on rural energy in Europe. What does the Europe hold? Hosted by RUMRA Smart Villages Intergroup with support of free initiative. I'm really happy that I can host this event, and I want to take this moment to express my gratitude to the free initiative who are focused on rural energy, who kindly helped to organize this series of events. Why rural energy matters? Rural communities are devastating when it comes to energy choice. European citizens living in rural areas face a reduced, costly, and often polluting and carbon-intensive choice to meet their energy need, not to mention an older and hard to heat or treat housing stock. We are few months or few weeks, I can say now, before the Fit for 55 package, which will be prepared by the European Commission in the mid of July this year. And in this big package, which is in connection with Green Deal, we will touch to all fields of energy sector which are connected also with rural area. We know that we speak every year more about decentralized energy sector, that we speak about smart grids, we speak about cooperatives in rural areas, we speak about connectivity, which is necessary for many topics about this. Energy efficiency is the number one thing when we speak about use of energy, and European Bauhaus program, which will be connected with renovation of the many buildings in the Europe, is one of the also essential part of this Green Deal or this package, which is connected to green, resilient, and also digital Europe. As we know, rural areas are areas in which we have possibility to produce wind energy, solar energy. We have many possibility with biomass, wooden biomass. There are also a lot of discussion now about bioeconomy, second generation of biorefinery and other things. So it's really a lot of things which we touch in the future months. We must underline that European Commission, the Commissioner Šuica, at the end of June will present long-term vision for rural areas. This is the strategic paper which will be connect all things connected with rural smart villages, and one of the very important part will be for sure also energy sector. About these things we will speak on the next RUMRA event on July 6th. There on the Intergroup we will host Commissioner Šuica and also Slovenian Agriculture Minister Jože Podgoršek will join us. I think that all we know that Slovenia will be presidency country in the second half of this year, and one of 10 priorities we will speak about during Slovenian presidency are also smart villages. And together with our minister, I organize also event on 1st of October in Slovenia, which will be connected with this, all these topics. I'm very glad that this debate are going on. This morning I had a big debate about global smart villages. There are people from Africa and all around, and it's really a pleasure that also on Expo Summit this year it will be possible. I will be in Dubai and I will also speak about these topics, and I think that we go in the right direction, and we must help also with such events to share, to develop this idea. So thanks again for free to help to organize this event. Thanks to all dear panelists who will be with us, especially my dear colleague from the European Parliament, Shane Kelly from Ireland, member of ITRE committee, will join to panel discussion. So I think that it will be one very good afternoon is in front of us, and I give the floor back to you, Adam. All the best to all of you.
Thank you very much, Franci. Always good to hear your reasonable view of things. It's now my pleasure to hand it over to Robert Honeyman, author of a study conducted on rural energy challenge across 10 member states. Please, Rob, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Adam, and thanks again to the Free Initiative for supporting us in doing the work that I'm going to be just briefly presenting. I just wanted to provide a sort of a brief snapshot of some of the information that we've been pulling together over the last year, looking at rural areas and some of the energy challenges that rural areas face, which I think nicely tees up the remaining conversation we're going to be having today.
Good photo.
So thanks very much. So good afternoon, everyone. So it's fantastic to be talking to you today. I've got 10 minutes. I just wanted to briefly give you a bit of an overview of my background and how I came to be speaking to you today. So I work as head of analysis at Gemserv, low carbon business unit. My team has worked with the Free Initiative to pull together some of the information that's available on the website, some of the country sheets and the fact sheets. There's lots of information about rural energy issues on the website, which I encourage you to have a look at. Also worth saying that though we're not covering it today, there's some really good information there on the renovation wave and the ETD revisions as well, and what that means for rural communities. So yeah, please take a look on the website. In terms of my background professionally, I've worked on heat decarbonisation for about 7 years now. I'm an energy economist by background, and particularly interested in rural and off-grid heating. From a personal level, the photo on the right-hand side is actually my parents, taken from my parents' front doorstep. I grew up in a rural area myself in the UK. And you can see a lot of my neighbours had older solid wall properties in the village, so I'm quite familiar with some of the technical challenges with decarbonising heat, but also some of the just transition challenges as well in terms of bringing people along and changing behaviour. So really happy to be speaking to you today. So before I dive into some of the information that we've been gathering, I just wanted to set the scene a little bit with I guess where we are in terms of the net zero challenge. So I think the net zero challenge is very clear. 2050 seems like a long way off, and indeed 10,000 days does seem like quite a long sort of amount of time. But when I think you compare it to the number of homes that will be that we will need to transition away from high carbon fossil fuels like heating oil and coal, we think there's about 35 to 42 million homes across Europe that are heating their homes with high carbon fossil fuels currently. I think when you think about the number of homes that we need to tackle, then that seems to be quite a challenge actually in the time frame that we've got. Additionally, we also know that 85 to 95% of homes will still be standing in 2050. So this is really a challenge about retrofitting and renovating existing homes. Of course, we need to make sure that new homes built are highly energy efficient, but we need to do something about the existing building stock across Europe. And homes in rural areas, as Frank mentioned, have certain energy challenges as well. They're typically older, they typically have a poorer energy efficiency level, and they might not have access to other energy resources that properties in urban areas might have access to, like gas grids or heat networks. So I think they should be treated differently to urban homes. And the solution, I'm not going to claim that I have the solution to all of the problems here, but I think it's really important that policy is developed using a data-driven approach. And I hope that we've been able to contribute to that with some of the information we've pulled together today. The building stock is very varied, so I think it's really important to understand exactly what sort of properties are out there and need to be renovated. I think we need to ensure that the technologies are in place for consumers, the markets are pushing in the right direction over the next 30 years, and that citizens feel encouraged to change their behaviour as well. Great, so that's a bit of context. I just wanted to provide, this is sort of literally a screenshot from the website, provide an overview of some of the information that we've been pulling together. So we've been looking at many different data sources and a number of different member states as well. We've been looking at collecting data on the age of the building stock, on the consumption of fossil fuels as well. So there's lots of information on the website. I'm not going to go through it all now, and also fuel poverty as well, which is absolutely crucial to this as well. And all that information is on the website. I did want to dive into a couple of examples to give you an idea of some of the data that we've pulled together. So on the left-hand side there, we've pulled together some information on the age of homes across Europe. The example on the left-hand side is Germany, and you can see that about 73% of German homes were built before 1978, so they're relatively old. Indeed, they were built before thermal building regulations were established in Germany, so they're likely to be also quite energy inefficient as well. And we've got sort of further information for the other countries that we've looked at as well on the website. Looking on the right hand side there, we've also got lots of information on energy poverty levels as well. This is taking the example of France. And you can see the different territories in France. You can see the proportion of households that face energy vulnerability, which range from about 10% of households in large urban centres that face energy vulnerability to, on the right-hand side, closer to 30% of households outside of urban areas face a level of energy vulnerability, which is similar but slightly different to energy poverty. They've all got slightly different sort of definitions. And then finally, two more examples that I just wanted to leave you with. On the left-hand side, we've also tried to take some of the energy consumption data that's available and translate that into CO2 emissions for rural areas. We've looked at the types of fuels that are commonly consumed in rural areas, so heating oil, woody biomass, coal, and LPG. And I think it's really interesting to see in Ireland, for example, how we've seen a transition away from coal, which is obviously a highly polluting, high carbon fossil fuel. But unfortunately, the transition's been towards heating oil, which is now the largest sort of consumed fuel for heating in Ireland. 36% of homes use heating oil to heat their homes. So I think some of this information really shows kind of the scale of the challenge in rural areas as well. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we haven't just looked at CO2, we've also looked at air quality, which is again really important and a critical issue across Europe. I think Italy is a particularly interesting case study there, particularly with high particulate matter emissions, which is known to cause premature death and illness across Europe as well. And I think it's interesting to see in our research that the majority, 87% of rural air quality stations in Italy reported air pollution, particulate matter levels above the WHO guidelines in 2017. So rural areas also see issues with air quality, and we know that there are some challenges, particularly with solid fuels such as coal and woody biomass being combusted and burnt and creating air pollution. So I think policymakers also need to be mindful in the transition of air quality alongside CO2. Great, so that's just a snippet of some of the information that's available on the website. There's a heap of data there, so please take time to have a look through that, and please get in touch if you have any questions on the data. I just wanted to leave you with, I guess, 3 reflections on the solution. I've spoken a lot about some of the challenges. I think we need to do 3 things well to cost effectively decarbonize heat across Europe. First of all, technology. I think absolutely technology is about bringing forward new innovations, reducing the cost of low carbon heating solutions for customers. But I also think it's about deploying the right technology in the right buildings as well. I think it's important to understand what the building stock, how the building stock looks in different countries, and to allow for a mixed technology approach. So recognizing that due to the variety of different homes out there across Europe, that we're going to need a mixture of technologies, not just one technology solution to cost effectively decarbonize heat. Markets are going to be crucial to delivery of many tens of millions of low carbon heating systems over the next 30 years. Absolutely, part of this is about bringing forward new supply chains, new installers to deliver low carbon heating systems. But I think it's also about utilizing existing supply chains, existing companies that already supply rural consumers with energy, fuel, and heat, and looking to use those existing supply chains intelligently to deliver the solutions in the time that we've got available. Also making sure that consumer information is improved and there's the right price incentives as well. And finally, and I think crucially, this is also about making sure that consumers feel that the transition is a just and a fair transition as well. I think public perception is going to be really important, and it's going to be really important that we ensure that households aren't left behind and impacted by energy poverty as well.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Okay, brilliant. That's me. That's my email address. Please do get in touch if you have any questions. Thanks. Back to you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Rob. Very, very interesting. I just bought a house in rural rural Belgium, just outside of Brussels, from 1930. Okay, so I'm all the more proud that it's using gas. But would be curious. The Belgian government incentivized us putting solar panels on the roof. I would be curious to know what the difference is, and well, it's a chat we'll have on a side sometime. And also interesting to note that there's no houses in Germany before 49, right? I wonder what the reason for that is. Question. So before I introduce our panel, thank you all for submitting your questions through the Slido link that we shared before the event. I would please ask you to stage additional questions if you have them now during the event, so that we can address them towards the end, and that there's no chance for the audience to interact with us and get some answers from our panelists. So where are we? Along with Rob, we welcome today the one and only, the very special MEP Sean Kelly from Ireland, and member of the ITRA committee, and also, of course, member of the RUMRA Smart Villages Intergroup. So hi, Sean. Welcome on board, as well as Stefan Schmidt, who is representing an off-grid energy provider, Prima Gas Energie. So hello, Stefan. And last but not least, Miss Sylvia Estiville, who is representing the Free Initiative today. Hi, Sylvia. Please, Sean, do you want to start, maybe? A question I would ask you, Sean, is the Commission is now tabling the Fit for 55 package with the aim to reach climate neutrality by 2050. In this context, how can EU legislation ensure that the needs of rural areas are taken into account?
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam, and hello to my fellow panelists. Let me say I welcome the opportunity to be part of this very important discussion, because things are moving at a rapid pace now in terms of decarbonising. And as you pointed out, the Fit for 55 package is something that only really transpired in the last 2 years, because people now realise that we have less time to save the planet than ever before. And rural areas are going to be huge in that, because as Robert pointed out, 130 million people live in rural areas, and the legislation is key to this, because legislation gives a signal to the market and it more or less compels member states to follow suit. So the Fit for 55 will contain the Renewable Energy Directive, which has been recast now, the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Energy Performance of Buildings, and side by side then with that, you're going to have the whole question of the methane and biodiversity strategies and the circular economy. And most of this actually will happen in rural areas, because that takes up by far and away the biggest area in terms of land mass than obviously urban areas. So the key point here, I think, is that we are now looking to work in harmony with nature and protect it rather than in conflict. And as Robert pointed out there, we had coal and oil as the main source of heat in rural houses. That has to change, and the legislation will make that happen, especially in relation to the traditional ones, which we now call traditional because they are no longer new, solar and wind and bioenergy. But also, I think waste is something that we can utilise much better, and I think you'll see a lot of opportunities through legislation to make that happen. And of course, you've also, of course, biomass and agricultural residues. They're all rural-based, and the key here is to set targets, which the European Union will do. For instance, the renewable energy targets were only set 3 years ago, which were seen as almost dramatic at the time, because the Commission and the Council wanted 27%, and we finished up with 32%. Now, when we recast that, it's going to go to at least 38 or 40%, and that will compel, that's the key word here, to compel member states to do all the things that Robert was talking about there to ensure that we do decarbonise. First of all, in terms of creating electricity, huge opportunities in rural areas to do that, as I pointed out, different things. Then, of course, in transport, electric vehicles, also tractors, lorries, all the rural modes of transport for carrying freight and goods and animals, they all have to become more efficient. And then, of course, buildings. And I think what we will need to do, Adam, as well as setting targets, we'll probably have to bring in, I think, an element, and I don't like using this word, but I think it will be inevitable, compulsion. Because if you don't, then there's the danger that short-term governments, who are only in government for 4 or 5 years, will embrace all these targets for 2030. No, they won't be in government in 2030, or preferably in 2050, but they won't be in politics in 2050. So there has to be an element of compulsion, that is, so much has to happen every particular year. I think that's going to be key. Also, I was very interested in what Robert said there. He pointed out in relation to Ireland, that up until 20, 30 years ago, all our houses are heated with coal nearly. Then it transitions to oil. But the key point here that I learned from that is transition is possible. The transition from coal to oil, now you make them transition from oil to renewables. You set a date by which it has to happen, and then if the European Union does that, the government has to put in place measures to do so, because the technologies are there, they are developing. It's only a question of incentives, compulsion, as I would call it, and then also the necessary workforce, qualified and skilled to do it. And then I think you're going to have massive changes over the next 5 or 10 years. We shouldn't be talking about 2050 anymore. We should be talking about the next 5 years. What are we going to do? Because that ties in every single government, more or less, at the moment to do it. So that's the way I would look at it, and that's the way when we'll be doing the review of the legislation in the European Parliament that I will be proposing. And I think that's what they will probably finish up, taking some of those aspects on board anyway. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Sean. Well, yes, that's the disadvantage of democracy, isn't it? We only have 4 or 5 year time frames to do things. Easier for the Chinese to plan, medium and long term ahead. But this is, I guess, also an expectation that that politicians sometimes think of whoever will be their predecessors or followers to then continue on the path that you've pre-trodden. Sylvia, Rob, would you like to add anything to what Shauna said? No?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I absolutely agree with Sean. I think the lesson of Ireland switching from solid fuels to heating oil illustrates that this is possible. I think consumers just need to be provided with a solution that is kind of palatable. So it needs to be convenient. It needs to be cost effective for consumers, and kind of with a sort of a strong regulatory push. I think we've seen sort of fairly quick transitions before, and I think it is possible again. So yeah, I would echo Sean's point there.
Thanks. Sylvie?
Yes, and also, I mean, the fact that we combine the 5-10 years time frame, which is very close, I would say even more 5, versus the 10,000 days that Rob mentioned initially, which looks like 2050 seems very far away. It's not that far away, but obviously we need to focus on things that are more short term if we also want to see an impact that will be quite immediate.
Stefan, if I can ask you the next question, I'll be curious to hear from you what you think the main energy challenges are encountered by off-grid consumers, and what are the potential solutions to these challenges?
First of all, let me admit I really like the approach of Robert just presented, so the data-driven approach, because this allows to identify the low-hanging fruits within this transition, which increases obviously the efficiency of the energy transition. When it comes to the rural consumers, in my opinion, those consumers often or sometimes feel a little bit left behind, to be honest. And this is due to the fact that there is a tendency to look for a silver bullet that solves all the problems within this transition at once. And often those favored solutions for urban areas, which are obviously designed mainly for urban areas, like CHPs or other solutions for spatially related buildings, or district heating and heat pumps and so on, aren't available in those rural areas, or maybe don't fit to the buildings. So we've seen that the building stock is old, the houses seem to tend to be bigger, and often they are very remote buildings that couldn't be connected to any of those grids just mentioned. So this brings completely different challenges for rural areas and its buildings when it comes to efficient and renewable heating systems. And on the other hand, as we've just seen, I think in Robert's study or on the material on the free homepage, these buildings have the highest percentage of coal and heating oil driven systems. So obviously those buildings are the low-hanging fruit when it comes to defossilization, and switching them to renewables would cause at least way above average emission savings, and it could be some kind of a just transition. Those, as Robert also mentioned, those are the high carbon fuels we need to phase out first, definitely. And to make the problems that the consumers in rural areas are facing more tangible, it's, for example, heat pumps often need underfloor heating, which would not only just at high costs, but also cause extended renovation measures. And many people won't be willing, this is what I hear when I talk to our customers, many people won't be willing to do those deep renovation. And not to forget, it's also a matter of the funding and the money they need to spend for it. So maybe people won't be able to afford those systems as well. This is also why we need to talk about energy poverty here as well. So this is definitely a topic when it comes to rural areas. And so what these consumers need is pragmatic solutions at first, I think. And they need solutions that could be tailored to their buildings, that are affordable and secure, of course. So there is an ask for policymakers to go for this pragmatic and technological neutral approach, to engage also the customers or consumers in rural areas to take part in this transition, and to show them that they are not left behind and that there are solutions that fit their needs as well. We as a company or a supplier offer conventional and bio-LPG, for example, which is a clean burning gas used in those off-grid areas. And LPG and bio-LPG are chemical completely identical, but according to the origins, bio-LPG could reduce CO2 emissions up to 90%. And due to its chemical similarity, even within the existing infrastructure, so there wouldn't be a need for switching the heating system. And in a best case scenario, this means no costs for a new system. And in addition to that, an immediate switch to renewable energy sources, which should be the goal of the whole transition process. And we, for example, are also working on alternative solutions like gas heat pumps driven by renewable gases, which are even more efficient than electrical heat pumps and could be used in the existing building stock as well, without causing high costs for the underfloor heating, as already mentioned. So, long story short, the needs of the rural consumers could be met if the upcoming decisions on the Fit for 55 package are based on a holistic and technological neutral approach that has a sense for those specific, very specific requirements of the consumers in rural areas.
Oh, I dream of an underfloor heating in my new house. You have to give me a special deal on that. So thank you very much. Rob, how would you say can we collect better data in rural areas?
Great question. Absolutely, yeah, great question. I mean, I think it all kind of actually just to go on sort of Stefan's previous question, if you don't mind. Actually, I think really the challenge is the target is 0, and everyone has to get to 0 within 30 years. I think that's at its simplest form, sort of the big challenge here. So I think for some consumers, some solutions will be absolutely right in terms of their building stock and in terms of their appetite for new innovative technologies. But I think we need to be making sure, I echo Stefan's point, that we need a mixed technology neutral approach here. So we need solutions for some consumers, like my next door neighbor Margaret, who hasn't changed her heating system in 40 years. We need some convenient solutions as well for those sorts of consumers. But anyway, in terms of data collection, we've used a lot of the data from Eurostat, which I think is sort of a really good starting point. I would encourage greater collection of rural data. At the minute, the data isn't often disaggregated between urban and rural areas, which is a bit of a challenge for us. And also, I think having the consistency between different markets is also really important as well. So I would sort of encourage greater consistency between the markets in terms of the data collection, and also a better disaggregation between urban and rural areas, which I think is really important if we're to develop the right solutions for rural communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think 90% reduction of CO2 emissions through bio-LPG is quite an impressive number already to get started. I mean, I wasn't aware of that, so I mean, there's something to aim for if you've heard of it. I don't know if Sean wants to react on any of the questions that came in through Slido. Do we have something?
But I think, as Stefan was pointing out, there are opportunities which need to be encouraged. And I think he made an interesting point out about gas heat pumps from our renewable gas. We have to look at ways that are cost efficient. The same applies to biomass boilers. Not everybody can afford or could do a retrofitting with heat pumps because it involves too much. But if you have sustainable wood production, then obviously biomass boilers would be a very easy alternative. And the boilers themselves, and this is what we will find once we pass legislation and send signals to the market, they're going to be improving the efficiency of all the technological supports that are there. And I know, for instance, that they hope in due course to have biomass boilers where there will be no smoke coming out to come back in and be reused. So all those technologies are going to, in themselves, become far more energy efficient as well. But we need, and this is where legislation is going to be so important, to send signals to the market and also to send deadlines. For instance, going back to the point again, for instance, about oil boilers, we should probably be setting a date when they would be no longer acceptable. So then that people would be aware that by a certain date, we need to change. And then, of course, side by side with that, you need incentives by way of grants, etc., to make it happen. Because that is going to be crucial. And as I think yourself, Adam, said in the beginning, and Sylvia, every single person has a role to play. And that is what we have to get everybody thinking about. Every single person, every single householder, every single worker, everybody has a role to play in reaching net zero emissions by 2050, and we have to address all those. And the signals we send through the legislation is going to decide how effective we're actually going to be in practice.
Thank you, Sean. I do see there has been one question here in the chat that came from Francisco Herrera. He's asking, why is air pollution a challenge in rural areas? Maybe, I don't know if Sylvia wants to answer that, or Stefan. I think we've covered a lot of the answers already due to the fossil fuels, but I mean, yeah.
If I may, so I think it's due to the fuels that are used in rural areas.
Yeah.
So if you have a look on Poland, I think there's more than 50% of the heating systems in rural areas are powered by coal, and then it's obvious where the pollution comes from. And this is obviously not just a low-hanging fruit when it comes to emissions in GHG, but also when it comes to air pollution. So this is, I think, if you change those heating systems, you won't just reach emission reductions, but also you will improve the air quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go on,
No, and I just wanted to add that apart from the challenge itself, it's the importance of what this means, because air pollution is directly linked to health. So the fact that we have this high pollution in areas where sometimes people tend to link pollution with like more urban areas, and this is more forgotten, but it's not in reality. So it's to bear in mind that the health is very, very linked to this, and we should address this challenge as well.
I think that's an essential point here, because this is our image, right? That as soon as you leave the city, the air quality is going to improve. And this doesn't have to necessarily be the case due to the energy problems that we have that we're learning today. So thank you for that. Actually, Sylvia, I'll stay right with you and maybe ask you the concluding question. And what I'll be curious to hear from you is what would you like our participants to get out of today's briefing? I mean, what do you think should be the essence of this?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that I don't know if everybody is aware of what FREE means, but I'll just mention FREE stands for the Future of Rural Energy in Europe. Yeah. But obviously, when it comes to takeaways, a key one would be to understand the specific energy needs and challenges in rural areas that have nothing to do with other areas, and therefore deserve different policies and measures. Also, I would like to highlight that the FREE study and the discussion we have held today have shown that rural areas have an old building stock. In most of the EU countries, half of the housing stock was built before the first thermal regulations. This means, as we said, before 1970. So EU member states still rely on high carbon fossil fuels, mainly oil and coal, for heating. And we all know that the negative consequences this brings to the nature of and to our health, as I was mentioned previously. So energy poverty is a widespread problem across Europe, and millions of Europeans are unable to afford thermal comfort. And finally, I would also like to point out that to deliver a just economic recovery, we call the EU institutions to take into account the specific energy needs for rural communities by doing different things, ensuring that the upcoming renovation wave addresses the rural energy poverty challenge by supporting the rollout of cost-effective solutions in rural areas, allowing an efficient energy transition in rural areas by supporting the replacement of old heating systems to reduce greenhouse emissions and energy consumption in off-grid homes, promote centralized, flexible, and affordable energy solutions for rural households and businesses, by the way, located off the grid, to secure their economic recovery following the COVID crisis. And finally, tackling the rural air quality problem by developing incentives. Incentives are crucial for cleaner and decarbonized energy alternatives and lowering the dependence on high polluting coal and oil. To me, that would be the main takeaways. Thank you, Adam.
Great. Thank you very much, Sylvia. If anyone wants to still make any concluding remarks, otherwise I would wrap it up. Sylvia, you wanna add something to that maybe, or?
No, if there are no more comments, then we're happy to wrap it up, I guess, right? That was like
I would think so.
For me. Yes.
Well, thank you very, very much to the two MEPs who have joined us, Mr. Bogovic, Mr. Kelly. Great pleasure seeing you every time, as well, of course, as all our speakers for their key insights on the topic. It's been really an absolute pleasure having you, and thank you for being so concise and on time. As we see by the timing now, I think this was very informative for all of us who were here. There is also, I think, FREE has made a barometer to better understand the specific needs of European citizens living in rural areas. So if you want to access that study, we will share that by email with you. Following the publication of the long-term vision for rural areas. So this is the big event that our intergroup will be hosting as soon as, and the date is not 100% clear yet, at the end of June, when the long-term vision for rural areas will be published. There will be a debate about the content of that, together with Vice President Šuica and the Slovenian Agricultural Minister, under the patronage of the Slovenian presidency. So I think this is definitely something to look out for, and we'll make sure, of course, to advertise that on social media and on our website. And finally, of course, I'd like to encourage you to join us for our next webinar in September, in collaboration with another member of the Intergroup, SEJA, the Council of European Young Farmers. The webinar will be called Decarbonizing Agriculture, Quick Wins with Cost-Effective and Available Solutions. So stay tuned, and thanks again for joining us today. I wish you all a very nice afternoon, and hopefully a sunny weekend, if that comes back again. In Spain it is, I'm sure. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
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 Thanks, bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.